We're going to look at the 4 most important steps to consider before you pull that retirement trigger and decide to retire. Stay tuned. This is Richard with Wisdom Investor, and I'm sitting here with Mark, neighbor and friend, and he has a background in accounting, finances, much like myself, and we're going to talk about retirement here. And Mark, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
As Rich pointed out, my name is Mark. I'm 63 years old. I retired a year and a half ago at 61 and a half. Glad I made that milestone in my life. Some of the interesting things related to retirement was I didn't start my 401k until I was 40 years old.
Interesting.
Back in the day when I started working after I graduated from college, back in the 80s and 90s, 401ks weren't that prominent, especially with small business. Most of my background is with small business, anywhere from $1 million to $85 million a year in revenue. I was also very fortunate. You can see by my shirt, I was a Nike employee for 4 years. I was the U.S. payroll manager for Nike, which was a very tough job, but learned quite a bit, and it helped me later in my career. So anyways, I didn't start my retirement savings until I was 40 years old. And I had taken a class at a local community college, and it was taught by an insurance company or insurance agent, as many of these courses are. And when I had my final review, he said I was doing everything right, had the right insurance, homeowners, life insurance, those kind of things. The one area that I lacked was in my 401k. And I believe I started working for Nike when I was 40, and that's when I started my 401k. And I think I had been into it by that time when I took the class, but my balance was very small.
Were you married at that time?
Yes, I was. And one of the reasons that I think it didn't feel at the time as important to save was my wife was a teacher for the public school here. I knew one day she would get her PERS, which is a huge benefit. And as we'll talk later, one of the reasons while I was able to retire at 61, she actually retired at 55.
Oh,
she had her 30 years
super.
So, anyways, yes.
Okay. Well, that's exciting. So you started saving eventually? Did you finally?
Yeah, so I started saving when I was 40. Of course, Nike had a match. As I got older, and one of the things that I've read about it after I started doing it, as I got annual raises, I tried to live within that net income and always put more money into the 401k. And eventually, I had left Nike, my last job. I worked for a heavy metal fabricator construction company for 15 years. I was maxing out my 401k at that point.
Good.
And then I was very fortunate. The employer put in 10% of our wages. So
nice.
I was probably saving close to 30 to 35% of my wages into my 401k.
That's incredible. Now, what about the other employees? Were they putting money away? Because you're involved in payroll. They say a lot of folks don't start thinking about retirement until they're in their 50s. And
right.
So what was going on with the employees where you were working?
Well, I really stressed it as the controller of the company, and I was the administrator of the 401k plan. I worked with, we happened to use Charles Schwab, so I worked very closely with those guys. There was the automatic match, and so you had to sign up in order to get the match. But my job was to push these people for sure to sign up, start doing at least the minimum so that they could get the match, and then stress to them that retirement is going to get here sooner than they think.
Right, no kidding.
Push them to do that. One of the things that I found with young people that I really tried to discourage was they tended to think of it as an ATM machine. And they would dip into it primarily for, like if they were going to buy a home or something like that, or if they had student debt. That's not what that account should be. And I really discouraged and actually set it up that if they wanted to withdraw money out of their account, they actually had to go see the owner of the company and sign off. So I tried to put these impediments in because it was important not to touch that money. I also encouraged young people, especially, to be very aggressive in their investments. Yeah, I'll just give you an example. When my daughter actually worked at Nike for 5 years after she graduated from college. When she brought home her 401k plan, she said, "Dad, I want to go very conservative." And I go, "Absolutely not. You're going to go very aggressive. You know, as a young person, you want to be 100% in stocks. You actually welcome a downturn in the market because this is an opportunity for you to put the same amount of money but get more shares in at a lower price." And again, I think young people don't understand this.
Right.
They're worried about losing this money, and that's when you're 30 years old. That's the last thing you should be worried about. So,
by the way, folks, if you have any comments, leave your comments, and if you like any part of this video, hit the like button. So we appreciate it. So let me ask you, so we're going to be looking at, Mark, the 4 most important things to think about before we retire. So What is your opinion on those areas? What do you feel like based on your experience?
My big areas, as my wife retired at 55, and I'm 2 years older than her, so I was 57, and I had to continue working primarily for health insurance. Plus,
that's a big one.
Plus, I didn't have the kind of money that I wanted to have in my 401k, and that's one of the areas that we'll talk about. But for me, as I got closer to 60 years old, I tried to look at what are the 3 or 4 most important areas that I'm concerned about that I want to address before I retire. And for me, their family, your job, your health, and ultimately your financial stability. Those were the 4 things that I asked myself before I said, "Am I ready to retire?"
Interesting. By the way, how did your daughter do? I'm going to go back on your daughter there. She invested aggressively. How many years was it that she worked at Nike?
She was there for 5 years. She's been away from Nike now for 2.
Okay.
And unfortunately, when she left the new company that she worked with, and here's kind of a great example of where I fell in as well. She went to a small advertising firm in Portland, and they made you wait a whole year before you could contribute and get a match in the 401k. So subsequently, my daughter didn't do anything. So she still has the money that she had. I think she's maybe got 30,000 or something like that, maybe.
Okay.
But again, she's only 29.
Okay.
The important thing is once she hits that year, she's got to start investing.
Right.
I preach that to my kids all the time. They don't always listen to Dad, but I tell them, "You'll hate me now, but you'll love me when you're 65 and you got that $1 million in the bank."
Excellent. So back to your 4 major elements. What you said, family.
So the first one's the family, and what I mean by that is, where are you at with your spouse and your children? And at 60 years old, it was almost a no-brainer for me because my wife had retired and my kids were now out of the house. Both my kids are married. We have a grandson. So from a family standpoint, that box was checked off. You know, when you're 45 and you have a family and you still have kids that are in grade school or high school and you're planning on college, that's going to be a tougher time for you to retire because you got a lot of expenses that you got coming in the next few years.
Let me ask him. This is just a short answer because you got more to cover. But you've heard of the FIRE movement?
Yes.
Financially independent, retire early.
Yes.
In 1 or 2 sentences, based on your theory, how does that fit in?
I think it's a great concept. I think that you have to be kind of a special individual to be able to accomplish that. I think the world has to be lined up just perfectly. And then also, I think you really have to ask. I think we all want to be retired. But do you really want to be retired when you're 40 or 45 or 50? Some people can do it. I think that's great. I don't know if both. Certainly financially, I wasn't ready to do that at that point in time. But I don't know that I was mentally either, because and maybe at another, if you have me over again, we can talk about, you know, what you do once you retire.
Right.
You know, you got to fill your day with stuff.
Right.
And it can't all just be watching TV. So there's a number of things that come into play with that. So, but anyway, so as we go down the list, for me, the boxes for family was checked off. So the next one that I looked at was job, and again. As an older, again, I started to look at this at 60. I was good at what I did. command a certain amount of income at my level. Money, this may sound weird to some of you guys out there, but money becomes less important, or at least it became less important to me as I got older. For me, it was about having enough money to be able to be happy after I stopped working. Mm-hmm. So you wanna make good money while you're working. I think the more importantly, though, you got to have some kind of savings plan. Obviously, if you make more money, you have an opportunity to save more money. But you don't have to be rich in order to get to that point. Right. It's just kind of a steady as she goes thing. If you start early and you're consistent, you'll get there.
Right.
So for my second one, I had accomplished, when I mean job, I'd accomplished what I wanted to do. I could kind of, in essence, write my own ticket. I wound up leaving my employer for 15 years and took a job. I had been banging out financial statements for all of my life, other than when I was at Nike. And so I wanted to try something different. So I took a position as a general manager for a small manufacturing company. It was one of these jobs, look out, you might get what you wish for. You know, as the general manager, you spend all day solving problems. Yeah. And it was a tough job because there were some things I didn't know about the company when I went in. It was a small company. I was very fortunate, and we can talk about that later. I was in a stock that I was getting beat up on that did really well. The last year I was there, and I was able to make enough money to retire.
Excellent, excellent. Way to go. Way to go.
So my family box was checked. My job box was checked. This next box is a huge box, and it was a huge box for me, and I won't get into too much detail, but the third box is health. And as Rich knows, I got cancer at 48. And I had colon cancer, quite a few surgeries, and kind of a tough time. But coming around in 2010, I was having my final colonoscopy. I only had a foot and a half of my colon left, and my colon burst.
Wow.
And I was in bad shape. And I actually didn't have solid foods for 6 months. There was probably a good chance I was going to die, although I never felt I was. But that certainly... As a matter of fact, I used to tell my doctors, if I die before I hit retirement, I'm going to be pissed. I mean, I just couldn't imagine anybody in this world working their whole life and then not being able to enjoy the fruits of their labor and die. So I was very fortunate in that it happened when I was very healthy. We had good health insurance. That was another thing that was certainly a push for me to want to get to retirement. I wasn't going to wait until I was 66 or 67, maybe to hit my maximum Social Security, or to, if a lot of people's goal is to have $1 million in their 401k. I was short of that, but I was healthy, some other things lined up, and I was able to pull the trigger and get out. So super. So certainly health is huge. And I know there's a lot of people out there that retire or are forced into retirement because of their health. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to be that guy, because when you're forced to do anything, it's usually probably not going to be on your terms. And you're going to wind up being short, maybe financially, mentally, you're maybe not ready to retire. So that was certainly a wake-up call for me. My big push was to get better, which I am, and to stay healthy through my retirement.
Right.
As a matter of fact, just as a side note, one of the things that I've read, because I read a lot of books on retirement and investing, and I think it's common knowledge that you can wind up spending over $200,000 in health costs when you retire. And so kind of my philosophy is I try to do something physical every day, whether it's work or lift weight, walk or work out. My thought process is if I could stay healthy and cut that $200,000 even into $100,000, that's $100,000 I can put in my pocket, give to my grandkids or my kids or whatever. Yeah. So health is certainly something you have to take very seriously.
Right. So family, job, and health. And what's the fourth area?
And the fourth area is I would call it financial stability. It's like, I think I'm living proof that you don't need to have $1 million in a 401k to retire. My wife and I are very fortunate. She has a pension. through being a teacher, which is very nice. I did, because of my health issues, although again I'm fine, I decided to take my Social Security at 62. You know, and I did the math, and I think based on what I put in and my employer put in, based on what I can take out, my break even is 74 years old. Yeah. And then if I would have waited what I'm taking out now versus if I would have waited till I was 66 and 6 months or whatever, right, I think the break even's 78. So, you know, my goal is to stay alive till I'm 85, and at that point in time, most of our big spending will have been done. And so I felt it was important to go ahead and dip into it now, to reduce, because when I retired, I had $740,000 in my 401k. So my goal now is to maintain that money so I can live within our means. Right. And so the less I take out of that, you know, the better, the more time it has to grow. Right. So I pulled the trigger. And then my wife is 2 years younger than me. Not this year, but next year she'll qualify then for her Social Security. So we'll get that as well. Okay. And then obviously that'll mean just less money we'll have to pull out of her 401k.
Well, that's great.
So those were the four things, and probably the biggest thing for financial stability for me was not to have any debt other than the mortgage. I think that is really important, especially if you don't have a ton of money in your 401k. You know, keep your credit card debt down. Both of our cars are paid for. Rich knows I was very fortunate through my life. I made a couple of real estate investments. My wife and I bought a cabin 30 years ago for $60,000 on a lake that's probably valued at $300,000 now, which we will never sell. Rich also knows I had an opportunity to buy into a partnership in a casa down in La Paz, Mexico, which is in Baja, Mexico. That's paid for as well. So we have 3 or 4 months a year we go down there. So
beautiful.
You know, at this point, we took some risks. Even though I started late in doing my 401k, we took a few calculated risks along the way. A few good things happened. A few bad things health-wise happened. But in the end, it all came to kind of fruition at the end here and allowed me to get out at 61 and a half, and I have no regrets.
Okay, well, that's exciting. So Mark gave us his 4 principles there: family, job, health, and financial stability. And he's really put together a nice plan, still alive and enjoying it. And so I want to thank you for sticking with us here on this video. It's really informative. I've never heard these 4 steps put together quite like that. And I think it's very, very intriguing. And we definitely like to have Mark come back, tell us how he's doing in retirement, how he's living. He's got a great lifestyle there, and probably even can tell us about health. I mean, that's a big decision, health insurance. So I want to thank everybody for joining us here today. Again, leave your comments. If you have anything that you like about this video, hit the like button. So thank you for watching.
Goodbye.